The rescue party could not believe it. When they finally found Rascal deep in the forest, the dog was sitting in a very big, open dog cage and was surrounded by at least a dozen black vultures. This was strange in itself, but the weirdest thing was that there seemed to be no way to get Rascal to move from his position. Only when they inspected the scene closely did they finally realize why this was the case. Even when the group managed to pick Rascal up and away from the cage, he immediately returned to it the moment he got the chance. Something was drawing the dog's attention so strongly, and the group had to figure out what it was. It was not easy, but the leader of the group, Matt, finally managed to get a look into the cage that Rascal was sitting in front of. It was only then that he realized what was actually going on. It took a lot of effort, but they eventually managed to get Rascal out of there. However, they ended up taking the cage with them, and, in turn, the vultures as well. But why did Rascal not want to move from his spot? What was in the old cage deep in the forest? And why were the vultures surrounding it? Before we start, smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Rascal, Miriam's beloved dog, caused a commotion in his owner's home while leaving for the forest. After about 2 days of Rascal's mysterious disappearance, Miriam had no option but to seek the help of her town's residents to search for the dog. Miriam was so desperate to find her dog that she vowed to do her best so Rascal could return home. After much persuasion from Miriam, everyone in the town decided to join the search for Rascal. Unfortunately, after long hours of searching, no one found a trace of the dog. Due to the vastness of the forest, the search seemed unending, and the people began to lose hope as their efforts appeared to be in vain. Just as Miriam was about to give up completely, she came across a group of the search party made up of some of her closest friends. Miriam's friends tried to encourage her and express their enthusiasm about the search. They reminded her that they had packed supplies that would last them for at least a week. The search party kept going. Fortunately, after about 2 days, they came across some tracks and indications of Rascal's movements in the forest. The group doubled their efforts and continued the search for hours. The further they went, the deeper they got into the forest until they reached parts that were rarely traveled by humans. This part of the forest barely had anything man-made. By the 3rd day of the search, the rescuers began to rethink their chances of finding Rascal. They felt the forest had enough predators that could have harmed him. However, on the same day, the group received another sign showing them the next route to take. They came across black vultures moving in a circular motion above a particular spot in the forest. At the sight of the vultures, the group knew there was most likely a dead animal nearby that had drawn the carcass-eating birds. They hoped the dead animal was a deer and not their much-loved Rascal. When they reached the scene, they were shocked by their discovery. They saw about a dozen black vultures, but no sign of a dead deer or anything dead. They paid little attention to the old dog cage at first because, in front of the mysterious cage, they saw Rascal. After about 3 days of rigorous searching, Rascal was found sitting calmly in the middle of the vultures. Rascal showed no sign of concern about the birds surrounding him, so the group tried scaring off the vultures to approach the dog. Surprisingly, as the group moved closer, the vultures showed no sign of fear. Instead, they were ready to attack. Before the rescuers could blink, the vultures had turned against them, flying at them with their beaks and claws. While the back and forth between the vultures and rescuers unfolded, Rascal sat calmly in the cage, watching. The people were amazed at Rascal's undisturbed attitude. The rescuers realized they needed a new approach to get Rascal's attention. Determined, they got another idea. One of the group members reminded them of Rascal's favorite canned food that they had brought along. When they opened the can, the enticing smell filled the air, and they were almost certain they'd get Rascal's attention. But to their surprise, Rascal remained where he was, even after smelling his favorite food. This caused discouragement to rise among the group. Their hope of Rascal running towards them was dashed, and they had no option but to come up with another strategy. Luckily, Matt, the unofficial leader of the group, came up with an idea. Without wasting time, Matt executed the plan. He threw the can of food a few meters away from where Rascal was sitting. The action didn't catch Rascal's attention as they expected, but thankfully, it caught the vultures' attention. They flew toward it at high speed, and Matt sighed with relief as he finally had the chance to approach Rascal. Matt thought he had succeeded in saving Rascal, but this turned out to be far from the truth. Rascal wasn't willing to be taken away. The dog became very aggressive and even tried to bite Matt's arm. In the end, it took help from 2 other men to calm Rascal down. By this point, the vultures had finished the food and noticed that Rascal was no longer in the cage. They flew in a large swarm toward the group, screeching and seemingly ready to peck their eyes out if needed. There was no other option but to put Rascal on the ground. If they tried to run with the aggressive dog, either he would escape or the vultures would catch up to them. Before the birds reached them, Matt decided to let Rascal go. When the dog landed on the ground, he immediately ran back to the cage and sat in the exact same spot. When Matt looked closer, he saw that the vultures weren't following the group. They were gathering around the cage again. The group was stunned. What was so special about that cage? Matt thought it was best to stay in the spot for a while. As night fell, the group decided to build a campfire. They had had a long day and decided to take turns keeping watch, always having someone awake to keep an eye on Rascal and see if the vultures would go away. Matt's prediction was right. Rascal eventually fell asleep, crawling deeper into the cage. But Matt was wrong about the vultures. Instead of leaving, they became more active at night. The only luck was that they moved up into the nearby trees, possibly looking for food. Someone from the group mentioned that vultures don't hunt at night, so maybe they were losing interest in the cage. Whatever the case, it gave the group a new opportunity. Matt and 1 other member of the group decided to act. They had 2 cans of food ready. When only a few vultures remained around the cage, they tossed the cans far from the cage. As before, the vultures rushed toward the cans, and even some birds that had flown away came rushing back. As the vultures ate, Matt silently approached the cage, closed the door, and lifted it, all without waking Rascal. The group quickly gathered their belongings, and they all made it out of there. As they walked, the sun began to rise, and Rascal woke up. Now that it was light, they could finally inspect Rascal and the cage. They took him out and checked him for any wounds. To their surprise, Rascal became stressed and wanted to return to the cage. When they looked more closely inside the cage, they saw some movement in the back. Matt immediately thought they were puppies, but after a closer look, he realized they were baby raccoons. Had Rascal been protecting these animals from the vultures? Was that why he hadn't wanted to leave the cage? After a long journey, the group finally arrived in the town. They were happy to bring Rascal back to Miriam, but they were also worried about separating him from his new friends. Luckily, this turned out to be unnecessary. Miriam was overjoyed to see her beloved dog again and hugged him for a long time, tears streaming down her cheeks. When Matt told her about the baby raccoons, she couldn't believe it. Being an animal lover, she wanted to see how things would go. With some advice from the local vet, she was able to keep the baby raccoons, and she's now raising them alongside Rascal. Miriam is still grateful to Matt and her friends for all their help.